Okay, welcome everyone to the Lofi Podcast. Today, my guest is TheZachMichael. How are you keeping?
I'm doing good. Been a busy day, but a good day. I'm excited for this conversation.
That's great. I'm glad to hear you're excited about it because so am I. So that makes the two of us. So yeah, just to get started, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Just sort of who you are, what you do, and do you have any other hobbies like outside of music?
Yeah, so I mean, first in music, I'm a producer and a songwriter, multi-instrumentalist. I do some composing for like TV, film, that sort of thing. And then I also run like a sound kit business and now run a publishing company. Um, Outside of music though, I'm pretty big into like design and that sort of thing. So I've been doing a lot of designing for like products through my company, like Anderson Apparel. We make like clothing and different products like that. And also cooking, I've been getting into a bit more over the past year or so, really trying to get, a lot better at making food and really getting into that. So that's been a fun hobby outside of music.
Yeah, you're quite busy. You've got a lot of things happening outside of music as well. Just out of curiosity, what kind of things do you like to cook?
Um, I've been doing a lot of honestly kind of everything. I'm really just kind of like trying different things. I don't know. I definitely grew up eating a lot of the same food like over and over again. So as I'm getting older now, I'm really trying to try things that I should have tried a long time ago. Like for instance, I recently tried a mango for the first time after yeah, after like a very long time. Um, not really cooking, but I'm trying things.
But still, you're sort of trying different foods that you haven't tried before.
Yeah.
Because that's crazy. Because whenever I think about it, mango is like one of the foods that I love to eat as like a child, even as a toddler. So just to think that you had a mango only recently,
Yeah.
man, it's exciting times in the world of food.
I know. I'm learning. I've been trying new seasonings I've never tried before, different meats that I've never had, etc. So it's been pretty fun to just kind of have like a outlet outside of music and that sort of thing to be creative.
Yeah, absolutely. Creativity can be found in so many different forms. Like, we can make music, we can make art, and, even cooking as well. It's sort of experimenting with different spices and different herbs just to see what things taste like.
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
yeah, I know, man. I could talk about this for ages. I think I should start a cooking podcast, but, um, so now that we've got to know a little bit about you, so how did you then get into music? So like, can you give us a little bit of your background and your history? Because I know you mentioned you were a multi instrumentalist there. So like, what instruments do you play?
So I mean, I started really young with the piano and then did that for a couple years and I don't know, I was decent at it. I was definitely accelerating faster than like the other kids my age, but at a certain point it wasn't really for me. So then I kind of switched to drums and now I've kind of gone back and I still play keys and drums and I kind of say like I'm not great at any instrument. Like don't ask me to play a song because it's not going to sound good. But if I can sit in front of like my DAW and I can like compose something, like I can make something that sounds good on almost any instrument. So I try to incorporate that into a lot of different music that I make. But yeah, I mean, it started out piano and drums, and then kind of gradually started picking up some other things here and there and learning little bits and pieces of any instrument. I'm not a great player of anything, but it gets the job done for the production work that I do and that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, that's like, I suppose even nowadays, with sort of more digital music and things like that, the DAW itself can also even be considered an instrument. People have to learn how to use it just as well as just a piano or a guitar or drums or anything like that. So,
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. Well, 100% you're right. I mean, I think for me, I'm not that great at any instrument, but if I can play enough takes and kind of chop it up in the DAW and process it and do all that stuff, it sounds just as good as like if someone played it perfectly in one take.
yeah, absolutely. That's the joy of music. Like, I suppose whenever things like tape first came around, people were able to cut and splice that and put multiple takes together. And now it's even easier just with digital audio. And so I think like the whole aspect of music is now available to so many more people than it used to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've done things where even like, like a chord progression, like, oh, I want to play a chord progression on the guitar, but I'm not good enough to play it all at once. And you can like literally strum each individual chord and put it on time or things, or sometimes maybe you're playing something's a little more like up tempo and it's hard to play. Well, you can slow the BPM down and play it really slow and then speed it up later. Things like that you couldn't do in the beginning of music,
It makes life so much easier for just beginner musicians as well who are just sort of getting into this. So you yourself, how did you sort of start to get into production? So how did your journey start in that way?
So I think gradually over time, a couple of the people who I knew from the piano stuff started doing a little bit of production stuff. I mean, no one was doing anything that great. It was like apps on iPads and things like that. But like I kind of knew what it was from that. And, at the time, I kind of just assumed that like everybody was just doing it. Like, I didn't know that like production was like its own kind of like role in music. I thought every musician did that. So for me, I just kind of quickly kind of started learning that and picked up like early copies of like FL Studio and things like that. And, kind of really started getting into that side of it, and just learning the skills, largely self-taught. I did a couple like local production classes with this person, but they didn't really teach me all that much when you actually break it down. A lot of it was online resources and just kind of learning through experimenting, which I think is a really fun stage in like your music career where you really don't know what you're doing, but like you try to figure it out. And it's a lot of experimental and a lot of trying and, a lot of doing things that are technically wrong, but like they sound the way you want it to sound. So who cares? And I just really fell in love with it. And I just put a lot of time into learning it,
Mm. Yeah, no, like I was the same whenever I started working with a DAW, because I didn't really have any sort of formal training in the side of digital audio, because I did learn instruments beforehand, but whenever I got into production, it's like just diving deep into it and just clicking all of these buttons and seeing what they do. It's sort of like, it's like creativity on steroids, if you know what I mean. You're just completely just like a child learning something new. And I think that's something that people should really just sort of grasp and hold on to whenever they're starting to learn how to use a DAW or something like that.
Yeah.
So like you mentioned you use FL Studio. Did you like try any other DAWs whenever you're starting up your production journey?
So I think when I started, I was mostly on FL Studio because, like, to me, FL Studio is kind of like a video game. Like, it looks like a video game, and it kind of feels like one when you're using it too. And I came from like doing a lot of gaming when I was a lot younger, so it kind of felt natural. But over time, as I started incorporating live instrumentation, I needed a different DAW for that because FL has some limitations at the time with like quantizing audio. Like, it was very good at quantizing MIDI. But when I wanted to use live instruments, it didn't really sound that good. So I shifted over to using Ableton for when I do like live instruments. Like right now I use a synthesizer called a Polybrute. It's made by like Arturia. And I use it in a lot of my productions that I do. And having Ableton where I can quantize the audio very quickly and it still sounds good and stuff is great. Now FL Studio has audio quantizing, but in my opinion, it's still not as easy and quick to use as Ableton's. So I kind of bounce between those two. I've also messed with Logic a little bit, like the Apple, one that you get on MacBooks and things like that. But for me, I work the most efficiently in FL Studio, and I tell every musician, like, when you're picking your DAW, whichever one you can get the idea out the fastest in is usually the right DAW to use.
Yeah, I entirely agree with you on that because whenever I started out, at the moment, my main DAW is now Logic, but loads of people online were saying we need to use this DAW, we need to use that DAW. But I think it's really just what clicks with you the most. Just as you said, that DAW that lets you get that idea out the fastest is the right DAW for you. Because like, I tried Fruity Loops and it really wasn't for me. And Ableton a little bit, but it's sort of just experimenting with the different DAWs and finding what works best for kind of your workflow. But the fact that you use both Fruity Loops and Ableton is quite interesting, and you go between the two of them. Do you like encounter any difficulties with that, or do you find that your sort of production flows seamlessly in between them?
I think it works in some ways and it doesn't work in others. For me, what I've found is that if I'm going into a track knowing I'm going to use live instrumentation, I'm usually starting with live instrumentation. So I'm going to go into Ableton and lay down the piano or lay down that drum break that I want to record or whatever instrument it's going to be. And I'm kind of laying that stuff down first in Ableton. And then I'll bounce that as like stems, like wave files, like a track out of each of the layers. And then I'll kind of drag that into FL Studio. And maybe in there, I'll layer the more, like digital sounding instruments or the VSTs. And I do a lot of the arrangement in FL Studio. I move a lot faster in FL Studio, right? Like I can do the same things in Ableton. It just takes me a little bit longer, and I am just so much more used to FL Studio. But I think if I was gonna bounce back and forth like over and over again, then it can get kind of challenging. So I try to kind of consciously think about what live instruments I'm gonna use. But I've had instances where you're going back and forth 10 times because you wanted to add something you didn't know you wanted to add.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good. So for any like sort of new producers listening, it's good that you mentioned that. So that they could use multiple DAWs anyway, just to see if it works for them and it helps them produce the idea that they have in their head and get it out there. Just do whatever works best for you. So yeah, we've talked a little bit about production, a little bit about DAWs, things like that. So whenever you started producing, were you producing lo-fi from the start, or did sort of your journey flow into the lo-fi genre?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely flowed. I mean, when I first started, the first thing I wanted to do was work with artists, and that was specifically like in the rap genre, right? So when I was first getting started, I, went on SoundCloud and I found a bunch of, upcoming artists, and I really did that sort of thing. And looking back, a lot of the beats I was sending people weren't that great and whatever. But I definitely started out producing for artists. I still do that today, but over time, I kind of realized that a lot of producers who produce for artists are kind of reliant on the artists in a lot of different ways, right? You have no control if the songs are going to come out or, the marketing of the song once it does come out. And I didn't like the idea of having a career in music that was beholden to other people. So I kind of realized that instrumental music was a way for me to be an artist, right? Because I'm not really a good singer. I help people write songs, but I'm not the vocalist. So I needed a form that I could use to be an artist. And lo-fi was something I'd always listened to. So naturally, that progression kind of happened. And, early on, it was less of even lo-fi stuff and more of just like broadly instrumental music. But over time, it became lo-fi. And then now I have so many instrumental projects. I mean, I have some that I don't even post about in, like I make instrumental rock music and I have meditation music, like ambient synth music that I make and all these different things. I just kind of really do a lot. But lo-fi has been a space that I really like being in. I think the community is great around here and the collaborative process has been very fun. And I've just got to know some really cool musicians over the years in the space. So I always keep coming back to that. And it's definitely become a focus point for my career as like one of the pillars of what I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I entirely agree with your comments just there about lo-fi having a great community. Like I say nearly on every interview that I do here on the podcast, that I always find the lo-fi community very sort of homely. And everybody's getting to know each other better as people, and there's so many collaborations going around. How do you feel about like all of these collaborations and that helping each other become better producers and musicians? What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I think collaboration is very awesome. I think it's a great thing. I mean, whether I'm producing music for artists or doing the lo-fi stuff, I mean, collaboration is a huge aspect of what I do. With that being said, though, I also do like creating a bunch of music myself, too. I have hundreds of tracks that are just me, 100% me. There's no collaborator. And I think having a bit of both has been really nice for me. I understand why people always push for collaboration, but sometimes you can finish that idea on your own as well, But with collaboration, I think it's great, especially when it comes from a genuine place. I mean, that's the one thing I like about lo-fi is that you can really quickly tell who's genuine about wanting to work with you and wanting to create music and who's just looking to get on a playlist or get some more streams from you, right? And I love those genuine collaborations. I've done multiple full collab albums with lo-fi artists. I've done a bunch of collabs with people over the years, and it's been really fun. It's a really fun process. And I like lo-fi because it's just super free in how you can collaborate, right? Like it's a lot of possibilities for how you can go about approaching it with people. But for me and my career, I've done one-off collabs here and there with people, but my favorite collabs will always be when I lock in with like a lo-fi artist and we work over months or years, and we have a catalog of 30 collabs together. That's a lot more fulfilling than just like a standoff one time we made a track.
Yeah, I entirely agree with you in what you just said, because there's certain artists that, I a couple of months ago or even over a year ago, I started making a collab with, and then over time, as it progressed, we just made more and more together. And you actually build genuine friendships with these people as well. Not just as artists behind a name on Spotify, but as the actual people who they are. And that's one of the most beautiful things about this lo-fi community. And also, you mentioned, yeah, collaboration. It's not just two people's name on a track on Spotify. It can also just be sending ideas to each other and helping each other out when things need to be done. So yeah, it's really, I think collaboration is really something that is fundamental to the whole lo-fi community. But it all needs to be done, as you said, with honesty and sort of an open heart to each other.
Yeah, 100%. I just love hearing how people change your ideas. Like one of the ways that I started collaborating in lo-fi is I make these like monthly sample packs, and it will have like 60, 70, 80 ideas. And I'll send that out to a couple collaborators that I have, and I'll be like, here's a ton of ideas I made on my guitars or my pianos, or these have flutes on them or strings on it, whatever it is. Kind of go through these and see if there's anything you would add to them. Like how would you change it? And I've had people do crazy things, changing the processing or really changing the tempo or the pitch. And it's created some really unique tracks that I don't think I would have come up with without collaborating.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone's able to bring their own ideas and sort of their own experience to the music, and it can go on just tangents that you never expected at all. So, yeah, you work a little bit with something called sync licensing. Now, a lot of people maybe listening to this will have no idea what this term even means. Could you explain a little bit about it and how it works?
Of course. So sync licensing is a huge aspect of my career. Why did I get into it? Similar to working with artists where you're kind of beholden to them and their schedule and their plan. I didn't like that. I wanted to build a career in music that I had control over. And in sync licensing, I believed that I had more control over my destiny because it didn't rely on an artist. Sync licensing is essentially creating and pitching music for use in synchronization. So think a TV show, a movie, a radio commercial, an advertisement, those sort of things, right? And I create a lot of music for different brands and different companies. I've done hundreds and hundreds of these sync placements with all different styles of music and all different genres. And it's been very rewarding in that I have a lot more control and freedom over the type of music I create and how often I create. And it's allowed me to explore sounds that I otherwise maybe wouldn't have done. And it also just gives me a lot of freedom to like really build a career that's mine, as opposed to always having to wait for artists or wait for, my song to make the album, etc. So essentially what you do is you'll create music in either one of two ways. Usually in sync licensing, you'll either work with a company like a sync agency or a music library that will have like what's called a brief. And they'll tell you, and it'll be like, Netflix is looking for R&B instrumentals that use these instruments from this BPM. And you can create music and pitch it that way. But for me, I never really had a lot of success doing that early on in my career. So what I did was I essentially became the company that was pitching the music. So I built the relationships with the people that decide whether the music gets placed in the TV show or not. And those are called music supervisors. So that's someone who's hired by Netflix or whatever TV station to decide which songs are going to go in the movie or the TV show. And I built relationships with these people over years, and then I just pitched them the music directly, right? Now I do some stuff with libraries and different companies, and even at my publishing company, like we help our clients get into sync licensing and land their first placements and things like that. But yeah, it's essentially pitching and getting your music placed in like TV shows and movies and films.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I have been told by other artists sort of about this concept of getting your music or your beats placed in different forms of media, but I didn't know how you'd even get into it or things like that. So what you've said is not just new information for maybe someone who's listening, but for me as well. So yeah, I can't even think of what more to ask about it, because I still need to just look more and research into it a bit. But it really just goes to show you the term, it's not what you know, but it's who you know, really can help you get these placements in different places and different TV shows or advertisements on TV and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, yeah, so you built up these relations over the years, but you obviously had to start somewhere. So, like, how did you get around this and to eventually get to where you are today?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing, just before I answer that question, you talk about wanting to have more research on sync licensing and things like that. One of the things that I've made a goal for my career this year is just to create more free to access resources for musicians to learn about all the different things I do in my career. So, on my website, elizabethrecords.net/blog, I upload a new blog every single day about a different topic in music. And there's a lot on sync licensing. So for people who want to learn the intricacies of that, there's a lot of articles that you can read about that, and new ones get created by me, every week, every couple of weeks.
Yeah, so that's elizabethrecords.net/blog.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's a ton on there, because when I was getting started in this space, I wanted to learn more about it, and there weren't many resources to learn about it. But as far as how I got started, essentially what happened is over time, I built these relationships with people, and they really weren't transactional at first. Like, I wasn't hitting up these people to get my music in TV shows. I wasn't hitting them up to place my music. I genuinely wanted to learn about what they do, how they've done it, etc. And I didn't pitch people music for a very long time. I think the thing people do wrong is they reach out right away saying, hey, I have this music. Can you get it in a TV show? You're going to get ignored most of the time, right? Because it doesn't matter how many streams you have or what big artists you've worked with. You're still just someone pitching your music to someone who doesn't want to be pitched, right? Like, at the end of the day, like, this person's job is to find music to place. So unless they're asking you for music, they're probably not looking for you to send it, right? But what happened is I built these genuine relationships over time, and eventually people realized that, oh, I like talking to this guy. I like his philosophy, his mindset on music and the business, etc. And they realized that I was easy to work with and super dependable. And once I got a little chance, I kicked the whole door in, right? Like, one of the first opportunities was someone asked me if I could make Afrobeat instrumentals. At the time, I had never made an Afrobeat instrumental in my life. It was brand new. I never had made it. I listened to a couple songs here and there, but I had no idea how to even go about producing this. And within 48 hours, I had a huge folder of Afrobeats that I had made. And they asked me to send one beat, but I sent a folder of, I think it was like 35 ideas. And, out of those 35 ideas, 7 of them were used, right? And what happened is I outworked everybody else who was asked, because everyone was asked to submit one song. I said, I'm going to submit 35. I'm going to submit a ton, right? Because, I could have spent all that time working on one track, but it takes the supervisor 10 seconds to say whether they like the instrumental or they don't want it. So if I have 35 instrumentals, that is 35 chances, right? And essentially, once I placed 7 out of 35, I realized, okay, there's something in this strategy. And a lot of people in the sync community didn't really like my approach. They said, oh, you're doing too much quantity. There's no quality in this, and whatever. And I would always say, no, quality is subjective. The idea that I need to spend 10 hours on each track when the supervisor spends 30 seconds listening and saying no is pointless to me, right? And I think that philosophy came from working with artists, because, like, when you're in the studio with an artist, you can set the beat that you believe is the best beat ever. Like, it's the best one you've ever made. If the artist doesn't like it, they're not going to record vocals on it, and that beat is done. So you need to have a lot of ideas, right? And essentially from that point, I just continued to network with people, and whenever someone would give me an opportunity, I would really show up, and I would really outwork whoever else I had to. I was super collaborative and super honest and polite and all those things. But I also knew that if I really wanted this, I had to want it more than everybody else, right? Like, I had to be willing to do the things they weren't willing to do. So if I can make more music that is good quality still than the other 10 people they work with, I am easier to work with and am like reliable enough and consistent enough that you're not going to ignore me. You're going to want to continue and do repeat business with me. And that's been super useful in my sync career, is building these relationships that lead to repeat business. Because a lot of people get their first sync placements and they become very difficult to work with. They feel entitled to certain things or they do too much. And I always made it very easy every single time. And yeah, there were times where maybe I got taken advantage of, or I could have got a little more money or whatever you want to call it. But I valued the relationship over everything. And I knew that kind of having that reliability was going to be the thing that once I got in, I got to stay in. Because a lot of people get a year of success in anything, but I wanted a career. So I needed to make sure that once I'm in the door, I get to stay here, you know? And I think that's super important.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting what you say. So just over time, build up relationships with these individuals. Don't force your way in, but whenever they give you the opportunity, be dedicated and be the best you can be at what you do. And then through that, you'll just sort of reap the rewards through that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is a principle that I've really applied to other areas of my career as well. I mean, one of my close collaborators is a lo-fi artist named Flapjacks. We've made a ton of music together over the years, etc. But, you know, at first, I think I either heard one of his tracks or he heard one of mine, and we just, you know, kept in contact for a little bit, saying we liked each other's sound, whatever. And eventually we did our first collab, and it did pretty well. It was a good track, you know, it performed very well, and it was fun to make, and we really enjoyed that process. And I was super easy to work with for him, and you know, he was super easy to work with for me. And then over time, you know, we just got closer, and eventually they got an opportunity from a record label in the lo-fi space to do like medieval music. And they had hit me up saying, "Hey, would you be interested in making some medieval music? Like, let's do a track or two." I think I sent him a folder of like 50 medieval ideas within like literally like within a day or two, right? A ton of music. And we made a lot of collabs. I mean, some of these tracks are out and are some of our best performing tracks, but also there's so many we've made that we've just kept to ourselves and we just enjoyed making them, you know? And so the same principle that I did in sync, I really do in all aspects of my career. It's the same thing when I work with an artist or when I work with anybody, really. And I think that more people should approach it that way. I'm not saying to just send a ton of ideas or send bad music to people, but you know, the more chances I give somebody to hear my sound, the more chances they're going to like one of the things I send them. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah. So no, but I definitely find it really good what you're saying is that, you know, not just to be a good artist, but also to be a good person with these relationships that you build with the other individuals, and to be dependable and to just be open, honest, and friendly to them as well. And through that, you will just simply be able to open more opportunities just by being a nice and good person.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my thing is simple. Like, I like to work with people who enjoy talking to me. If you don't, you know, I mean, like, I want you to like talking to me, and I have so many conversations with people outside of us collaborating and the business and whatever, and just genuine relationships. I think that's super important. And I think so many people in the music business, in the lo-fi community, in the sync world are all super transactional. And I think the single most reason that I've stood out is that nothing I do is transactional, right? Like I don't need to collaborate with anybody, so I don't move in a way where I'm desperate for that collaboration. I'm not rushing to be a part of your album. I'd love to be on your album, and I think it'd be really fun, but I don't need to be, you know? And I think that that is a rare thing in music. I think people are used to dealing with people who need that instant return on investment, that instant ROI of, oh, I DM this person and they don't want to already work and make music with me. Like I sent them a hello, here's my music, let's collab, and they didn't respond, right? I have no problem spending however long it takes just building a relationship. And if we make music someday, that's awesome. But, you know, with Flapjacks, we've made a ton of music. But if me and him never make another collab ever again, he's still going to get the same text messages from me, the same phone calls, the same whatever. It's not transactional, you know, and a lot of people really are transactional, especially I think in the lo-fi space, because people are so attracted to those big playlists and the monthly listeners and those things. Whereas for me, I don't care about any of that stuff, you know?
Yeah, what you've just said there are just some really great words of wisdom that I believe will be helpful to a lot of artists that are just starting off. So, thank you so much for sharing them. Okay, so we talked a little bit about sync licensing there, but you have your own label as well, Elizabeth Lo-Fi Records. Can you tell us a little bit about that and sort of how you got it started and, where you are today with it?
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially what happened is after a while of being in the lo-fi space and working with some of these labels and, doing a lot of my own releases independently, I started realizing that I was kind of doing the role of a label for my own stuff independently. And so I kind of had my own thing, Elizabeth Records. That's kind of where like I've branded a lot of my stuff under that company, and my sound kits are under that, and all these different things. And eventually, I was like, I think I'm gonna make like an instrumental record label and do lo-fi stuff, and hopefully help more people in the lo-fi space. So we work with a lot of different people, and something that I think is really cool about Elizabeth Lo-Fi Records is that we've been able to take producers who have like more traditional success, as in like they work with artists or they do other genres of music, and then we kind of bring them into lo-fi and kind of help expose them to this world and this community and so that's been pretty cool. And then additionally than that, we've also made compilation albums be like a real focus of what we do. We put out a ton of them last year. We're going to put out a ton more this year. I just think community is super cool, and I think the compilation album idea was always something that really excited me. When I was first coming up in lo-fi, I mean, my goal was to be on like 10 compilation albums a year, and so now I create the compilation albums with our team, and we have other people submit their tracks, and my tracks are on there, and all this stuff, and so it's been going pretty smooth. I think it's overall been pretty good, and it's just been really fun to kind of help support other people in lo-fi and really kind of curate the community in a way with these compilation albums. And we've even had people start to collaborate outside of the label, but they met through like being on a compilation album together or things like that.
Yeah, no, that's great. You've reminded me of on the episode of the Lo-Fi Podcast that I did an interview with Cucamello. We were talking about how great it is that we can build communities around labels. And so whenever you're looking at the tracks, you see names that you've seen before, and you really see how there's this little group of producers forming around a label, getting to know each other better, collaborating and working together. And it's great that you're doing that with Elizabeth Lo-Fi as well, and making these compilation releases. And so then the artists can sort of become known. Whenever someone sees an Elizabeth Lo-Fi compilation, they can recognize these names and even then become part of the community themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also been really just a really cool way to kind of spotlight how successful a community can be. Like when everybody all comes together to promote an album that we all worked on together. And with us, we've made it pretty conscious that every single compilation album is going to have kind of like a theme to it. And so a lot of these albums, they sound very like sonically cohesive, and they all kind of fit a theme. And so it's been really fun to A, curate that style of music, and B, see how people take some of the ideas that we've had and kind of evolve them into their own sound and that sort of thing. So it's been really fun, and we're going to have a lot more coming. It's a super fulfilling part of, my career in lo-fi, is just kind of like getting to pay forward some of the success to other people of all different levels,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's great. It's you can have all these producers working together sort of on the same sonic wavelength to make tracks that are in similar styles, and how they all flow together. And that's all part of the community as well that we can build in sort of the whole genre of lo-fi. So a little bit less about sort of labels and things like that. Just out of curiosity, what kind of music do you like to enjoy to listen to in your own personal time? Like, what kind of genres do you like outside of lo-fi, or do you listen to a lot of lo-fi maybe?
I do definitely listen to a lot of lo-fi. I mean, part of my role outside of being a music creative is on like the business side, right? Like I run a publishing company and a label and things like that. So whenever I'm doing those like business admin sort of tasks, I usually have lo-fi on, and that's where I discover a lot of the instrumentalists that I want to work with. And I curate my own playlist, and so I'm listening to those, and got other streams from other labels on. Just I'm constantly listening to lo-fi music. But outside of that, I mean, honestly, I kind of listen to a little bit of everything. I'm a big believer in that you can take inspiration from all these different genres and styles. So I'm listening to everything. You know, I run a publishing company, so like every Friday we're listening to the new albums that come out from these different artists and seeing, you know, who's on these songs and who's not collecting their publishing and stuff. And then we step in and we try to, you know, help people make sure they're getting paid properly in music and that sort of thing. So I'm really listening to everything. You know, like I definitely go through phases of like what's the main genre I'm listening to. Like right now I'm listening to a lot of like more indie music and more acoustic sounding stuff. But, you know, it ranges from that to pop stuff to more R&B to hip hop stuff, really kind of all over the place, you know. And I think that that's like a really cool thing about music and like streaming services and things like that is you can really discover a lot of types of music, you know, anytime you want.
Yeah, no, I entirely agree with your thoughts there as well about how we can sort of draw inspiration from all the different genres of music that we listen to. And I, similarly to you, you know, I listen to anything and I'd go through little phases, you know, maybe once every couple of weeks of a specific genre I might be listening to more than the other. But at the same time, you know, we listen to them all. We sort of take little bits that we might find interesting, and then, you know, we can incorporate it into the music we make ourselves as well, and in collaborations with others too. So, you know, that's one of the great things about sort of art, and that, you know, we can take inspiration from others and sort of learn and grow from that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So, just a last question before we wrap up. So, you know, lo-fi, it's one of these genres that we love to see as a community and people working together and collaborating. So maybe if there's some new artists out there who are maybe not quite sure how to get collaborating with others, do you have any recommendations? Because I know earlier we were speaking, you know, firstly just to be, you know, a good person and a nice person to others, but could you maybe build on from that and how we can sort of reach out to other artists to start collaborations?
Yeah, of course. So I think there's kind of a couple key things. I think the first thing you should do is if you want to get in lo-fi, I do think you should have some music released of just yours. You want people to be able to hear your sound and kind of know a bit of like where you gravitate toward and what sort of stuff you like to make. So I always recommend, you know, have a little bit of music out before you pursue collaborations. But once you kind of start having some tracks out, I think the best rule of thumb is going to be to either reach out to people one-on-one and try to build those relationships, or go to places where people are already looking for collabs, right? Because instead of you asking somebody, hey, can you collab? You can find people who are already looking for collaboration and go to them, right? If I'm a guitar player, I can go DM 100 lo-fi people on Instagram, say, hey, I can play guitar on your tracks. But out of those 100 people, a lot of them are not looking for a guitarist, right? Whereas if I go to maybe a Discord community or a Reddit community or something like that, and someone types, hey, I'm looking for a guitarist, then I can reach out to them and say, hey, I'm a guitarist, I can help you. And rather than feeling like you're asking someone for a favor of like, hey, will you collaborate with me? Instead, you're providing value because that person's looking for a guitarist, right? I also think it's worth mentioning that, like, when you're reaching out for collaborations, I think people, as they start to see success and as their monthly listeners grow and things like that, a lot of people do look at those guys as merely an opportunity to gain listeners and get on playlists and whatever it is. So try to focus on people who are around your size or even smaller, because you're a lot more likely to be genuine in those cases. It's a lot easier for that person to know that, oh, you just want to make music with me. Whereas when you see these guys with like hundreds of thousands of monthly listeners, I mean, they get asked a lot to collaborate. And usually the people are only interested in collaborating with them because of how many listeners they have. They might not even be familiar with this person's music or this person's sound or this person's personality, right? So I think that's a huge key when it comes to collaboration that I think a lot of people really don't focus on enough, you know? And I do think you got to really provide something to people, right? Like if you really want to get in the lo-fi space, I think you're going to see a lot of success if you can provide value to people who need music and just kind of build those relationships and have a skill that they need. Maybe it's a different approach, or, you know, maybe the way you do your drums is a little different than everybody else, or maybe you can play trumpet, right? Like I have a friend, Dr. Bloom. He recently got into lo-fi through me. Like he never really released instrumental music. He's, worked a lot in like the traditional industry. He's done stuff with like Nas and Mike Posner, and he toured with 21 Pilots. And he's a very awesome jazz musician, and he plays trumpet really well. And so me and him had known each other for a while, but eventually I was like, hey, your trumpet is really cool, can you play this on some of my tracks? And that's just evolved to us doing a ton of albums together. And we actually in December did like a Christmas cover album, like a lo-fi Christmas cover album, and some of the tracks went viral on like TikTok and that sort of thing. I think we did like 40 or 50 million views with these sounds, and like 20,000 videos created using these lo-fi beats and stuff. So it's been pretty cool. And I think it just comes from a genuine place. Like we weren't really making this music looking at monthly listeners or things like that, but rather kind of just looking at like the mutual skills that we have and how we can make something that sounded really cool. And I think when you lead with that, you actually find more success than if you were chasing people based off what they've done or how many monthly listeners they have, you know?
Yeah, no, that's really good. It's, yeah, what you say is we need to do this because we love the music, because we love the art and what we do. And, if we are really dedicated and have our heart in what we produce, just whatever happens after that doesn't really matter, because, we've put our all into it. And this is real, heartfelt, genuine music that we've made. And what we want to produce, not just from this idea of I want to get more monthly listeners, or I just want to hit on this playlist and things like that. So that's definitely something that even more established lo-fi artists, I think, really need to be reminded of sometimes, that we're here for the love of music and not just for the whole idea that we want to make it big.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really think that if more people approached it that way, you would actually find more success faster. I think a lot of people are doing things mostly right, and there's usually like 10 or 20% of your like mindset that if you shift, you would like 10x everything you're doing from a success standpoint and from a creative fulfillment standpoint and from the sound of your music and all these things. So to me, I think that little mindset shift really can propel you to achieve all the things you want to achieve, but do it in a better way. I also think like in lo-fi, it's so easy to just be like looking at people as just an artist rather than a person. And so I, will forever think that if you can approach it from a human perspective, you're really going to find a lot more success long term. I mean, when you talk to anybody who's really been in this game for a long period of time and made a lot of music, they, have built genuine relationships with people that span a long period of time. And a lot of the most successful lo-fi artists have done a lot of collaboration with the same people and have really built up processes that work for them. And, it was all genuine. They weren't going into it trying to get a million streams or get on an editorial playlist. It really was a genuine like, hey, I like this thing you do, I do this thing, let's do stuff together. And they started on the same level and gradually over time, kind of built up together. And I think that that is huge, both in lo-fi, but really in any creative endeavor you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you so much for saying this, because I believe that's something that even I myself needed to hear right now, because there's just, I've been working with lots of artists, and I'm thinking like maybe I should sort of branch out and work with other people. But you've made me realize that a lot of the collaborations that I make now with the same artists is because we enjoy making music together. We've built up that relationship together, and whenever we sort of send ideas to each other, we know that we can be open and we have like full creative liberty over what we can do. And it's that whole community around lo-fi is what I really love about this genre, and the reason that I started this podcast and everything. So yeah, but thank you so much for this conversation and being willing to do this interview. Before we wrap up, could you just let us know where maybe we can find you online, and are you even open for collaborations as well?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm definitely open to collaborations. Again, the best way to do it though is provide some type of value or something that I can't do myself. Like don't go look at the monthly listener count and say that's why I want to collaborate with this guy. Like let's have a conversation, introduce yourself. Like we don't have to rush to it. I'm down to collaborate, and sometimes I'll collaborate with people by the end of the first conversation, but it's also like it's okay to let relationships build and just try to learn from people where you can and share about yourself. But I'm always open to collaboration. Where can you find me? All my social media is at TheZachMichael. I release music under Sleeping Shark, which is like my main instrumental project, but I also have Relaxed Vibes that I put instrumental music out under. And then I have a bunch of other aliases as well because I make a lot of different styles of music at a high volume. So I needed to have a bunch of different places to put it. And then additionally on there, if you want to learn more about like some of the other stuff I do or, any of those other things, ElizabethRecords.net, my website, got everything on there from the blogs to the products. So if you want to learn more about the publishing company and like the publishing royalty side and that sort of stuff, there's a lot of information and a lot of resources there. And also a ton of free to download sample packs and drum kits and all that stuff,
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, here, thank you so much once again. Hope you have a great evening and we'll chat to you soon. All the best.
Awesome.